The value of experience, the joke, the spectacle, the shock, the community of which the knower is not a part. My real life situation comes from the comedy skit sketch show Saturday Night Live. And according to one of my sources, as described by one of my sources, quote, the joke went like this. During heterosexual actor Josh Krasinski's opening host monologue, cast members kept interrupting to ask him about The Office, including lots of probing questions about Pam. That's when heterosexual actor Pete Davidson appeared on stage beside him. I think they really need for somebody to be Pam, Davidson told Krasinski. I think we've got to give them what they want. Jim, I think you have to kiss Pam. So they kissed. My immediate thoughts after watching this video clip was that the kiss was used solely as a joking spectacle, and that while there may be various knowledge takeaways from this, a very prominent one is that the notion of minority peoples, specifically the LGBTQ plus community, uh, is that they are something shocking or abnormal, and that their existence is a joke. As a minority figure myself, this topic is especially significant to me as I understand the oppressed history of people like me and have firsthand experience with both harassment on the basis of my identity and experience with my identity being used as a joke. This topic is important to me because the sharing of knowledge by sources unexperienced negatively affects me directly. The knowledge claim that comes from the assumed knowledge claim that comes from this real life situation is that two men kissing is shocking or comical. So my first thoughts when thinking about this real life situation was, is the media a reliable source of knowledge about society? Should identities be used in a comical manner? And how is understanding perspective important when claiming knowledge? Through memory and intuition as ways of knowing, we as an audience already know that this skit's purpose was supposed to be comical and not inherently informative. However, it still presents a knowledge claim. How, but as a comedy sketch, was it really meant to be accurate? Did they understand that the perspective that they had? And who was their intended audience? Therefore, as my knowledge question, I ask, what is the role of experience when assessing the quality of a source of shared knowledge? I will be exploring this through history and the arts as two areas of knowledge. History because both primary and secondary sources are used in history, and arts because an artist uses their experienced knowledge. So is that better than unexperienced knowledge? We will find out. My first decontextualization, or my first development, comes from the area of history. My claim is that on one hand, my claim is that experience has an ethical appeal when assessing the quality of shared knowledge sources. Through Brock University, I was able to find their way of assessing the quality of a source of shared knowledge, and they call it radar, RADAR. And experience falls under the second A, the category of authority. Experienced knowers use emotion, memory, and sense perception as ways of knowing. And without experience with the history being studied, a knowledge source has no perspective, and therefore experience has that ethical appeal. Primary sources of knowledge prove authority, because knowers experience the knowledge. On the other hand, my counterclaim is that without experience, a shared knowledge source can still be assessed as valuable in quality, because, especially within history, secondary sources are widely used. They use reason, imagination, and intuition as ways of knowing, and aggregate primary knowledge sources to remove bias. So not only are they more available, but they also have the possibility of being more accurate by taking away the bias. After my first after my first development, I have no conclusions because there are arguments on both sides. Because of this inconclusiveness, I decided to travel along with my second development and my second area of knowledge, the arts. I claim that experience plays little role in art because the purpose is not usually informative. According to the TOK Course Companion, the arts, quote, deliberately shape knowledge. Artists make aesthetic choices, and the audience is variable, end quote. Artists use their unique medium to be able to rely more heavily on emotion or imagination as ways of knowing rather than testifying the most accurate historical truth. On the other hand, experience is necessary when extracting knowledge from sources of art because, regardless of the intended purpose of the art is still used as a primary resource for knowledge. Emotion and imagination are, in fact, ways of knowing and should not be disregarded as invalid because these ways of knowing help to convey the artist's perspective, one accurate historical truth. In conclusion, through each area of knowledge, there were arguments on both sides. Seemingly inconclusive. However, I conclude that while experience enhances shared knowledge sources, it is not the only assessor of the quality of knowledge sources. Experience has value, but knowledge sources should not be disregarded as invalid if they are without experience. At the same time, experience is inherently biased, and secondary knowledge sources aggregate these biased sources, these personal knowledge sources, in order to offset the effects of that bias. While experience can play a role in verifying the authority of a knowledge source, sometimes it does the opposite, and knowledge sources without it should not be disregarded because they are not they can be veritable. To link this back to my real life situation, experience would have enhanced the performance of the piece and informed them, and the knowledge through those experiences of the identities of which they were describing would have gave them the knowledge that and informs them that the message that they are showing through the piece causes harm to the communities that they are talking about. Saturday Night Live is a secondary knowledge source, so they are aggregating from other sources, from other beliefs of society. But as an art source, they shape knowledge to appeal to their audience. Finally, I asked myself one last question, and that was, is the message presented by Saturday Night Live an accurate representation of the state of society? I don't know. But SNL uses their unexperienced perspective to aggregate some of the beliefs of society and present their findings to an audience. Just like teachers do when they aggregate sources to teach students. And just like parents do. Teachers and parents don't always have that experience, but they're still able to teach without and share knowledge without that experience. Thank you for listening.